talk to faces of these corporations that you normally think are faceless, and they're just as human as me or you, you know, but their corporation may be profit driven, but you know, it's all out there for educational purposes and this and that.
And this is an interesting show to learn all these dynamics of this segment. So what else, before we sign off, what was one of the coolest things you saw at Cultivate?
Tissue culture. As you know, I've liked to work with agar and tissue culture samples from fungi to plants as well. But this one was a new technique. You're pulling from the tip of the apical meristem, which is just the very top growth point of the plant, and you're just picking off like a millimeter in size and drop it in to the agar mix, which is a specialized mix they created that they found, you know, creates a larger propagation, a faster propagation, and a healthier propagation. And it was just amazing to me. It looked like a piece of, they had just dropped a piece of pepper on top of it. And then all of a sudden the next stage, they showed the next stage, and the thing was about an inch tall, and it had a nice root structure, and the next one started to look like a real plant. And it's really cool because I like to see the tissue culture. It's a cost-effective way to propagate thousands of genetically identical plants that you know are going to be reliable in your production.
Yeah, I love tissue culture, and I talked to the same guy in one of the booths, and I was asking him, why isn't there more tissue culture stuff? And he's like, oh, we're sharing this for example, but we don't like to share the information. So apparently it's pretty competitive for tissue culture too.
Well, it's a new emerging market. I worked with it about 4 years ago, but it wasn't on the scale or the sophistication that we've seen now. It's progressing quickly. It's surprising that it's just now coming around. It's been around so long. The recipe has been around for the agar for about 50 years, 60 years. I would butcher the name if I try to say it. It's like Mushigi Skoog or
I'm not even going to try to say it, and I know the word you're talking about. So if you can always Google tissue culture. There's tons of great information. Fraser's probably Googling it right next to me.
I am. I'm sitting here. I gotta figure out how to pronounce it because it's disrespectful.
So I will say some of my favorite things at Cultivate was I love tissue culture. I love all the microgreen stuff. The automation. Everything for automation in greenhouses.
Mirashik Skoog.
And there we go.
Mirashik and Skoog. Pardon me. These are two different fellas.
Tissue culture. You can look that one up and learn. Is there anything else I missed off the list? The cool stuff at Cultivate 15 in Columbus, Ohio. All right, Fraser. You've been on the show before. If someone wants to find what you do on social media, what's your name?
Perpetual Harvest.
And it's not like that on Instagram, is it?
Perpetual_harvest.
There you go. Perpetual_harvest on Instagram for Fraser. It's a good one. Follow it. So Fraser, before we end, is there anything else that you noticed or wanted to say about Cultivate 15?
The industry is changing fast, and if you don't understand it, you're going to get left behind, or you're going to get angry.
There was a lot of hydro stores there too. It was cool.
No, yeah, it was interesting to see the retail market that's trying to cross over. There's so many of us that have been in the retail market for so long, and the crossover is just a complete learning process. It's like starting from scratch. And so there's a bunch of people that are trying to do it because they see the future is in the commercial ag market, for hydroponics especially.
So there you go. I want to come to this show next year. Will you?
I think so. I mean, absolutely, I think so. I think it's only going to get better. Hopefully, you know, people continue to move this way and there's more ethical brands that move into the market, or, you know.
Get more education out there.
Yeah, the
learn
education.
About it.
Yeah.
Organic gardening is a thing.
Oh, I can't believe there was a seminar put on by, you know, the M Word, and
sponsored, not put on, sponsored.
Well, whatever, they're a part of it. And what was the title? What is organic gardening, and does it really work?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a crazy question.
It's worked for me for several years.
But you gotta, some people think organic gardening is a fad.
A fad? It's, the synthetic gardening is actually a fad that's only been around for a little less than a century.
Well, for commercial use, so we'll see. And now you're seeing a greater demand for organics, and you're seeing some really cool greener products. BioWorks has some cool pesticides, insecticides, all kinds of stuff in the green market.
There's cool hydroponic organic fertilizers that are coming out that are being tested out there.
Oh, there definitely are organic hydroponic fertilizers for things like GWC or NFT.
Alternative to those that don't want the fishy smell around the house.
So, I love the show. Thank you for joining me, Fraser.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
I hope I can force you to be on the show again.
Just maybe one more time.
Awesome.
That's all I can do.
Till next time, this is Emily and A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com.
We must question the system and these politicians' wisdom. Can't plant a garden here, needs to be hidden. You pay for your property, but listen. Can't plant a garden here, needs to be hidden. It's how the law was written. Make organic food forbidden. They want control your kitchen.
DFCRadio.com.
Here at Green Grow, we take organic gardening seriously. With our mycorrhizae products, you'll increase growth and help reduce the need to replace old, worn-out soil. We help provide electrolytes and maximize nutrient intake to make your indoor garden lush and green. So give your plants the strength that they need and breathe life into your soil with Green Grow. Find us at your local nursery or visit us at thegreengrow.com. That's thegreen.com.
Girl in a Garden quick tip. Ashes can be used as a plant food. Ashes from your stove can be used as plant food. Wood ashes are high in alkaline content and have trace amounts of calcium and potassium, which encourages blooms. If your soil tends to be acidic, sprinkle the ashes in spring around alkaline-loving plants such as hydrangeas, lilacs, and roses. Avoid your acid-loving plants, such like rhododendrons, blueberries, and azaleas. Avoid using ashes from easy-to-ignite, preformed logs, since they may contain chemicals that are toxic to plants. Also be sparing when adding to your compost pile. They can counteract with the benefits of manure and other high-nitrogen materials. For more information and tips, tune in to A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com, 5 p.m. on Tuesdays.
Hey, Dr. Duff, are you signing up for another one of those internet dating sites after your divorce?
Nah, I'm just ordering these freaking douchebags from China here. Just gonna be saving a lot of money on it. About $1 a bag.
Did you say douchebags?
Yeah, they're pots. They're fabric pots. They're, made in China. They save $1 a bag from all the other.
Oh, it sounds like an imitation smart pot or something.
Yeah, save $1, but, I'm pretty sure these douchebags are gonna work.
Dude, I had a buddy of mine who used those same douchebags. He bought them direct from China. It killed his whole garden.
Bro, what? So I'm better off spending that extra $1 on a smart pot?
I'd get a smart pot.
Don't be a Duff Man. Make sure to buy the original patented Smart Pot. Check them out at smartpots.com.
You are listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on DFCRadio.com.
We're listening to DFCRadio.com.
Welcome to A Girl in a Garden on DFCRadio.com. This is your host, Emily. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about soil. And this is a topic that we're going to cover in maybe 15 to 20 minutes today. And it is a topic that could be talked about for years and has been talked about for years. So this is just the start of a soil exploration. So today I'm talking with Luke Besmer. He is a bacteriologist, and I can get tongue-tied saying that 3 times fast, at North Coast Laboratories. He's also the owner of T-Lab up in Humboldt County. How are you doing today, Luke?
Doing excellent. How are you?
I am fantastic. So today we're going to talk a little bit about super soil. And I guess the starting out point is, what is super soil? And typically when you buy pre-bagged soil, how much feed is put into that bag of soil that you buy?
That's a great question. A lot of the numbers are going to vary. It goes both ways. The numbers will vary as much as the varies will number. Depending on how many amendments are put into that volume of soil.
Now, I will say on average, just a normal thing when you buy soil at your garden center at the hydro store, it has about 3 weeks worth of food in there.
Yeah, that's it. Most gardeners will say if you have a relatively well amended soil, get through the solid 3 weeks. You could vegetative growth you can often push through that in 3 weeks really nicely if you're just moving up from clones.
So usually when you're transplanting say we're going to go with clones, so you're transplanting some clones in from a clone size to maybe a 1 or 2 gallon container. You put a well amended soil in there and you typically have about 3 weeks worth of food.
Yes. And after that, what do you got to do? You got to feed it somehow, so then you decide, well, do I transplant into some well-amended mix, or do I transplant into something not well-amended and liquid feed? So you can go different ways with your gardening technique. So using a super soil is a way to build up your soil really well with a bunch of different amendments that are going to provide all the nutrients that the plant will need throughout the rest of its growth cycle.
So no bottles are needed when you're watering. So one of the things when you have super soil out there is instead of having that 3 weeks worth of food, you have the whole cycle of food when you transplant it in there. And you're just using water. It's not new. It's a technique that's been used forever. But you're starting to see super soil mixes in the hydro stores or the garden centers. And it's something that's a little bit new to some of these growers out there, and I will say there's a little bit of confusion out there. One of them that I know of that you can find and I've grown with some great results is TGA Super Soil, and it says it has a NPK of 3.7, 5.7, and 0.7, and I have grown a whole cycle with their Super Soil. It works great. And then I have found this other company that I will say I have not used this company at all. But, all right, here it is. It's Michigan Made Mix M3 soil. And it has an NPK of 15, 33, 38. And I could continue on this conversation with, there's a lot more companies out there with these pre-baked super soils. And you're just using water the whole time. But I want to get some more information because you can purchase it from somewhere else, but super soil is pretty easy to make. So super soil is not that hard to make. if you get the right high quality ingredients. So what is a simple super soil to start out with if you're going to make your own for the first time?
Make your own. Okay. Here is a basic recipe that will do your garden justice. You're going to use some worm castings, some bone meal, some bat guano that's high in phosphorus, some blood meal that's high in nitrogen, some rock phosphate that has some more slowly available phosphorus. You're going to use some Epsom salts for your magnesium and sulfur. You're going to put in some dolomite, also known as sweet lime. Dolomite is calcium and magnesium, and that's also a buffer, a pH buffer. So if your pH starts dropping low, which it will in these organic soils, well, the dolomite helps to bring that right back up, and it makes it sit at 6.4, 6.5, so your plants love it. It keeps everything alive as far as the microbiology goes, too. You're also going to want to get some micronutrients in there for your trace elements. So azomite is a great option. There's a heck of a lot of other ones, too. We'll probably get into that in a little bit here. And then you'll want to get some other humic-type substances there. Humic acid, fulvic acid. Those can go in liquid or powder. And I always recommend some compost, extra high-quality compost. That is your the rich part of the blend. And then to fluff it out, you're going to use peat moss and or cocoa, depending on what you prefer. And then perlite. I recommend perlite or pumice stone or volcanic rock to lighten things up. There's your simple soil, simple super soil.
So I'm going to say the base or what you're using for the inert medium before you add in amendments. Typical ones would be, as we just talked about, let me bring them up in my mind, cocoa or peat seems to be the two that most people use.
Yeah, those are the two most common base media amendments. This is before it really even turns into a soil. Cocoa and peat moss.
And some say one is better than the other. They, as all garden products that you use in the garden or soils, they have positives and negatives. Sometimes for peats, they do destroy bogs, so they aren't as renewable. They cannot rehydrate, and they can be a little bit acidic. But there's also a lot of benefits for using peat as a base in super soil. It has a high CEC, has biology associated with it. It's a true humic substance and consistent media, and it holds water. So the WHC, and you definitely want stuff that holds water, so you do not have to water as often while we're in a drought. Now, the other base that people use is cocoa, and again, positives and negatives. It is high in salt, so it does need to be washed before you use it. It has a low CEC, so CalMag is needed when you grow with cocoa. But some of the positives is it's renewable, it has a consistent media, inert, and it does hold quite a bit of water. So that itself is a completely different conversation. What's better, peat or cocoa? Depending on your growing needs, so they both work. Do you agree with that statement?
I agree. That was quite the statement. Well said.
That was a really long statement, but
basically what it boiled down to was that cocoa and peat both have their advantages and disadvantages. I recommend to use whichever one you are going to have consistent access to and or that you are already very comfortable with. They are going to behave in different ways when it comes to watering and what they do with other nutrients. So personally, I am more comfortable with peat moss, and I like using peat moss mixes. But that's just me. I know people that are very good with cocoa, and that's just because they've used it for a long time. So it really is a matter of what you have gotten good at, and then what you decide to use based on your standpoint of it all. I do definitely recognize the environmental impacts of peat moss, and hope to. I don't know. Maybe I'll start growing peat bogs.
Now, I will say, I do remember, man, I guess it was a few years ago, but there was people caught up here illegally harvesting peat bogs.
It was ponds. They were something about, there was ponds
up
that
in
they
Humboldt
were draining.
County.
Yeah, it was a soil blend, McClellan Mountain. It sounded like some really good stuff.
Yeah, so that's a different backstory completely.
Different kind of bog.
I just remember there was a peat farm up here that got in a little bit of trouble for harvesting it the wrong way. So there are guidelines that are followed when harvesting peat bogs, though. So some people love it, some people hate it. It's up to you, and you can grow some amazing plants in peat.
Yeah, the thing of what I like about peat is the way it responds to water. Though, one of the negative things about it, if you were to let it dry out all the way, you will never be able to let it, or it'll never rehydrate the same way again. Basically, what happens is when all the water is gone and 100% dehydrated, the cell walls of the little peat moss tubes you could think of squish together, and then they will never be able to unsquish. So you've probably experienced that, like a houseplant that you might have forgotten about and really dried out, and you tried to water it, and the water just sits right on top. Well, there you go. So that's one of the negatives about peat. But if you're on top of it as a gardener, you're probably not really going to let that happen. As far as storing soil, well, there's a different story.
That's another topic we're going to have to go on. So you rattle off a recipe of super soil that you add into your base.
Yeah.
What would be a good place? Because we just said we said a few ingredients, but it was still almost 10 ingredients for super soil.
Yeah. What's a good base for that? Well, if I would say, like, if you were to just use either cocoa or peat moss, or a combination of cocoa and peat moss at about 75%, and then perlite at 25%, and that's your base medium right there. That's a really good mix for aeration. And then when you put in the other organic nutrients on top of that, the compost, the castings, bone meal, and all that, well, that's going to make that mix even more dense and more water holding. So that 75-25 mix, in the end, you're going to be bumping that up to closer to probably a 15% peat, or I'm sorry, 15% perlite, whatever your aerator is, and some 85% probably organic content. That includes that peat moss and peat moss or cocoa. So basically what I'm saying is you'll make a pretty thick mix if you start with roughly 25% perlite and 75% peat or cocoa.
So where is a good reference source online to learn more about super soils or getting these ingredients?
Well, online, there's all kinds of sites now that have different super soil recipes. There's some really popular recipes out there. Subcool has got a great recipe. It's been used successfully by a lot of people. A lot of people are taking that recipe and expanding on it. That's one of the neat things about super soils. You can have a lot of fun with it. You can find a lot of different areas around the country here and around the world have certain or access to certain amendments that other people don't have. So if you can find some really neat local things, like here we have abalone farms. I have a friend that, or not abalone farms, I'm sorry, but people that go out in the ocean here in Shelter Cove and dive for abalone. So I've got friends that have been taking the abalone guts and dumping them into 55-gallon barrels with some EM1 and some sugar, and they're making their own abalone hydrolysate. So you can't really get abalone hydrolysate all the way around the country, but certain people have access to things like moose droppings. Well, that's going to have some unique benefit to it. So something about your own super soil, hey, get really creative, get neat with it, find some neat local stuff, use these other proven super soil mixes you see online, use that as your base to then start playing with and see how things respond. Don't ever do anything crazy. Don't put too much of anything, but you can always add a little bit, and hey, do those trials. Do just a couple plants in a different pots with something a little bit different to just see how it works for you. And hey, often you might you might see things don't work, but that's how you get to be a better gardener. Your failures are just as important as your successes.
I will say gardening is a learning process. I have been gardening for many years, and I never stop learning with gardening. You will find there are a lot of things that you can do wrong, but that is the baseline of how to do it right the next time. Because I have killed a lot of plants in my time.
Oh yeah, I have definitely killed a lot of plants in my time. A little story, I worked at a large propagation facility down in San Diego. We would plant 100,000 plants a day on an average day. So one time this was when I first started and I was just getting into the horticulture industry. I had a botany background, and botany is way different than horticulture is. So we ran out of our mix of the peat perlite that was that 75-25% mix, and we had just bags of peat moss. And so instead of sticking our cuttings into plug trays full of our 75-25% peat perlite mix, we were sticking them straight into 100% peat moss. So this peat moss held way too much water, and probably had too much CEC, where the plant there wasn't much chemical interactions down in at the tip, stimulating basically calluses never formed, and I lost good 80 or so thousand plants.
Only 80,000.
Only 80,000. But hey, those are the sort of mistakes that you learn from, I guess. But
I've learned on smaller scales than 80,000.
Yeah, I guess the bigger the mistake, the more you remember. Remember not to do it again.
That is your PSA for today.
Says something about don't make a major change. That major change I made was a large. When you talk about the volume of peat moss to perlite, from 25% perlite to no perlite, well, that changes the environment of the soil quite a bit. So the plants are going to do a lot different things if you change things up that much. So, but a little bit here, a little bit there, you're not going to hurt anything.
Now, you also have a calculator on your website, isn't that correct?
Yeah, I put together a handy soil amendment calculator. Part of what I do also is soil consulting. I've been doing this for the past few years, where we'll have soil testing done, take the soil test, and give people recipes for their soil so they can rebuild it with exactly what they need, and almost more importantly, what they don't need, or make sure they're not putting in things that they don't need in their soil that create even more problems. So part of this soil consulting, I built a decent little Excel calculator so I could just plug in the amount of pots people had, the gallon size of those pots, or I could use beds, trenches, and fields with cubic footage. And basically it would just pump out a list of, or amounts from a list of amendments, telling me how many pounds of each amendment I would need, and then how many cups per pot when I got back home and was dishing things out, or pot or cups per bed, or however it was. So it was just a handy calculator for me and my clients to be able to figure things out. Well, finally I was able to get this thing online. So now you out there, Girl in the Garden listeners, can go to composttlab.com, and there's a soil amendment calculator where you can just plug in the number of pots you have, the size of those pots, and it'll give you how much of each amendment that you'll need. And the amendments that are up there are things like different types of guanos, azomite, trace minerals, blood meals, bone meals. The list is extensive. It's growing and growing, and it's just a way to make it easier. Sorry, go ahead.
I will say, as a new gardener, I guess not a new gardener, as someone who's getting into some of these super soils, as you just said, the list will go on and on. You have a pretty comprehensive, large list that can also be a little overwhelming at first. So that's why we were saying start out with this basic recipe that Luke said earlier in the interview, and to go on places like buildasoil.com or some of these other forums to learn more about these amendments and elements you add into your soil base.
Yeah.
And then you can start to make something that's going to fit your garden specifically.
Yeah. It's always great to be able to try to find things locally. That way you don't have to pay for so much shipping is one thing. When you're shipping around organic matter, it's heavy and it costs a lot to ship. So go around to your local gardening stores. You don't necessarily, or you might not find it at the local hydroponic store. You might go to the farm store.
farm supply store. Those are actually great places to find amendments.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're really great priced, and it's good to get to know those folks. So find what you can locally. If you can't find things locally, or if you want to try to get some more of the boutique type amendments, there are some great websites coming up. There's some people at buildasoil.com. They seem like they're doing a really good job at getting things out there. So I recommend those guys. And beyond that,
your own website.
My own, all in all, I think Build a Soil is doing a great job. So they can do that. I'll keep up with the tea thing.
And I know we're going to be talking about this a lot more and adding in a lot more websites to check out because there's a ton of products, there's a ton of information. I know I don't have enough free time because I do have to sleep every once in a while to look into all of these sites just yet. But that is the exploration of when we talk about soil and microbes and organic gardening and feeding the plants just with water the whole season.
Yeah, that's the idea of the super soil, is that you've got your plant transplanted into this thing, and now you're just going to be watering it with compost teas and clear water. When I say clear water, I mean with no fertilizer that's been pH balanced. You want to water in right around 6.5 to 7. Which is a bit higher than your typical watering in at high 5s or something like that if you're growing hydroponically or with the liquid nutrients that you might be used to. So you'll get through a whole run with just this well-amended soil. Like I mentioned earlier, compost tea is really important because all of those amendments that you put in there, they need to be processed by microbes in order for them to be made available to the plants. So it is very important. Like, you could build a well-built super soil, and it will do you little good if you're not using microbes. So use both compost teas and root powders, endomycorrhizal inoculants, the bacterial mycorrhizal inoculants. I'll definitely get a mix of those in your system, both aerobic and anaerobic. So the fermented ones like EM1, for instance, is a great anaerobic and low to no oxygen breathing bacteria and things, rooting powders like Great White or Root Bloom. Those things are great things for getting good beneficial aerobic bacteria, oxygen breathers.
So I'm going to interrupt you because we just went off way subject from our super soil.
But that's just to say that
I will say, though, this is what I'm going to ask you.
Microbes are so important for super soil.
This is what I'm going to ask you. Will you join me again and talk to us about compost teas?
I will.
You will, because that's another subject that we can go on for a very long time about.
Yes, I agree.
So we're going to break that into a different section.
Soil in general, like...
You want to start out with good soil, right?
It's... The deeper you dig into soil, the more you find. I don't know, I was trying to come up with a wise statement there.
Luke makes wise statements sometimes.
Every once in a while. And it's either wise or completely asinine.
This is why I don't record myself all the time. Right. So, I have to say thank you, Luke, for joining me to start with some of our talks that A Girl in a Garden will be having with people who work in this industry about soil, because soil's important. We have to grow plants in something. If it's not hydroponics and water, it's in soil or a super soil or a blend of ingredients. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
And until next time, this is Emily on A Girl in a Garden on DFCRadio.com.
Happy growing.
About a thing, 'cause every little thing gonna be alright.
DFCRadio.com.
Here at Green Grow, we take organic gardening seriously. With our mycorrhizae products, you'll increase growth and help reduce the need to replace old, worn-out soil. We help provide electrolytes and maximize nutrient intake to make your indoor garden lush and green. So give your plants the strength that they need and breathe life into your soil with GreenGrow. Find us at your local nursery or visit us at thegreengrow.com. That's thegreen.com.
A Girl in a Garden quick tip. Ashes can be used as a plant food. Ashes from your stove can be used as plant food. Wood ashes are high in alkaline content and have trace amounts of calcium and potassium, which encourages blooms. If your soil tends to be acidic, sprinkle the ashes in spring around alkaline-loving plants such as hydrangeas, lilacs, and roses. Avoid your acid-loving plants, such like rhododendrons, blueberries, and azaleas. Avoid using ashes from easy-to-ignite, preformed logs, since they may contain chemicals that are toxic to plants. Also be sparing when adding to your compost pile. They can counteract with the benefits of manure and other high nitrogen materials. For more information and tips, tune in to A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com, 5 p.m. on Tuesdays.
Hey, Dr. Duff, are you signing up for another one of those internet dating sites after your divorce?
Nah, I'm just ordering these freaking douchebags from China here. Just gonna be saving a lot of money on it. About $1 a bag.
Did you say douchebags?
Yeah, they're pots. They're fabric pots. They're, made in China. They save $1 a bag from all the other.
Oh, it sounds like an imitation smart pot or something.
Yeah, save $1, but, I'm pretty sure these douchebags are gonna work.
Dude, I had a buddy of mine who used those same douchebags. He bought them direct from China. It killed his whole garden.
Bro, what? So I'm better off spending that extra $1 on a smart pot?
I'd get a smart pot.
Don't be a Duff man. Make sure to buy the original patented Smart Pot. Check them out at smartpots.com.
You are listening to the beautiful Emily Walter on dfcradio.com.
We're listening to DFCRadio.com.
Watch me burn. Well, that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. Well, that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie.
Welcome back to A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com. Thank you, Fraser Love, for joining me as I forced him to be on the show yesterday so we could talk about Cultivate 15. I love the microgreen stuff. I love the tissue culture, the greenhouses. Everything at that show is absolutely amazing, and it is extremely well organized and fun with a great group of people. So I look forward to going to that show next year. For sure. Now, next week, I'm actually getting a weekend off when it's been a long time since I've had a weekend where I didn't have to work. And so next weekend, I'm going to work a little bit on gardening and canning. So I have a brand new garden, which is a blank slate. And I have been bringing some new products or some new plants over. I haven't bought any, I went and brought my smart pots over to my community garden plot and transplanted a bunch of stuff. And I'm slowly bringing some things that I want over from my community garden plot to my new garden. And I just put together that cool tower garden, and I need to finish taking it apart and bringing it back over to the garden, or to my new garden, and put it back together. So lots of stuff going on in my garden. Hopefully I can do some videos to talk about the different changes that I'm making. So next week I'll talk about gardening. I do have a guest lined up, so we'll be talking about DWC growing once my internet gets hooked up, and then I'm all set to do interviews. And again, I'll also be talking about Cultivate 15. I have a suitcase full of cool marketing material. I am just really pleased with this show and how it was. So there you go. That was this week's show. And until next week, this is Emily on A Girl in a Garden on dfcradio.com.
Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. But that's alright because I love
We're listening to EFC Radio.com.